Michelle, and going first is the hardest job. You make mine much easier, so thank you very much. Uh,
Thank you. All those
Amy, would you
contributions.
put up my open records template? We don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but I wanted to go over a couple of things,
Yes,
especially
just
since not everybody is from Louisville. In fact, probably most aren't. So, gang, if you are asking an agency that has done everything online, you don't really need to pay attention to this letter. But on the thesis that some of you or all of us sometimes need to request records by way of a letter, I thought it would be helpful to come up with a template. And if Amy hasn't already, she will send you this. I think it's pretty straightforward, but the parts that I thought might need to be explained, I put footnotes in. This is kind of tedious and it's a lot of information, but the points that I wanted to emphasize are that I think every agency has a formal records custodian, and that's the person whose job it is to comply with your request. So if you make a quick phone call to the agency and ask, who is the records custodian for your agency, then you can put that person's name in the letter, and that speeds things up a little bit. Another trick that I have used is if I'm required to submit a hard copy letter, and if it's convenient for me, I will take 2 copies to the agency and ask the receptionist to date stamp both copies. And then that way I have a record of when they received it and when the meter starts ticking for the now 5 days to respond. Again, be as specific as you can, but the last paragraph before the thank you for your assistance is the thing that I wanted to go over. If you are requesting records that have to be provided to you as a hard copy, the agency has a right to charge you per page, and you don't want to get stuck with a 4-digit bill. So what I always do is put this sentence here that says, please let me know if my request would incur a cost more than, and I put a relatively low dollar figure on it, so that if it's going to be $100, that records custodian will call me and we can discuss, do I want $100 worth of records, or is there a way for me to truncate my response to make it both more affordable and more manageable just to get through it? And beyond that, I think it's sufficiently self-explanatory. And we can go on to the top tips for effective activism, please, Amy. Now, I'm going to get kind of philosophical on you all. I have been doing environmental activism, believe it or not, 51 years. I'm older than I look, and I got started very young. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. 5 out of the 6 of us had birth defects. My mother didn't have time to do things for me. I had to do them myself. And when grown-ups don't tell you you can't, you just start doing stuff. So I organized my first recycling drive when I was only 13, including arranging for the trucks and stuff. These people probably didn't know I was 13, but what the hell, So people ask me, how have you dealt with this stuff for 51 years? And I think that the answer to that question is embedded in this document. But I have to say the number one thing is you've got to choose your battles wisely. You have to follow your passion, and you can't let other people pick your battles for you. I get phone calls from people who have a problem in their community. Sometimes it's not even in Kentucky, and they want me to help them to fight their battle. Besides the fact that I don't have time to take on other people's battles, their elected officials or community officials really don't care what somebody from out way far away thinks anyway. It doesn't make sense for me to take on their battle. And it just wouldn't be sustainable. We're trying to make a sustainable world, and we've got to make sure that our engagement with this movement is sustainable or we burn out. And that's a shame. I've met a lot of people over the years who burned out, and I'm hoping that this document helps you not to burn out. So I think it's important for you to work on the issues that really matter to you. And when I have people call me up and say, I'd like to get more active, my top objective is to get them to tell me where their passion lies and what skill they have they would like to contribute or what skill they would like to develop. Because by being involved in multiple groups, I can help them to find a group where they could groove on their passion and either use the skill they love or develop that new skill they want to learn. And I just think if it's not mutually rewarding that way, their engagement won't be sustainable. So look for that in for yourself. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to be strategic and think critically. I'm going to loop back up to the first point right here. Tom Fitzgerald is known nationally for being super, super effective. And people say to me, how does he do it? Well, I've got two basic answers. One, he's one of the smartest people I know, and I know a whole lot of smart people. But two, he chooses his battles wisely and he responds to them in a very strategic way. He does his homework, he thinks critically. I just can't emphasize enough that if you go in half cocked, whoever it is you're trying to rein in is going to find your sloppiness and use it against you. And I'm not telling you to be risk adverse because that's not going to work either. But I think it's really important to get this kind of information that I've listed here and then turn it around to your advantage. And the example I'll give you is in 1990, I both became a foster mother of a severely emotionally disturbed kid, a single foster mother, which I don't need to tell you was challenging. And our mayor then proposed to um, build a new incinerator and import twice as much garbage as we already generated, pay 2.5 times more per ton to burn it, to sell the steam to a local industry that I frankly wasn't so sure would still be here. They are, but they could have left like a lot of other heavy industries, et cetera, et cetera. And we were going to eliminate recycling, oh, by the way, in this proposal. So another engineer and we started to come up with what are we going to do about this? Well, what we did was an open records request, and we got the data on how many garbage trucks does the city of Louisville have, how many workers does it have, how many houses does it pick up from, how many tons. We took all this data, and on my little Apple IIe computer, we massaged it in a spreadsheet, and we were able to show that without hiring more workers or buying more trucks, we could reconfigure the system for the city to go from and to where we would have one garbage pickup a week, one recycling pickup, and one yard waste pickup, which we didn't even have yard waste then. So the point being is, it was really hard for the city to argue with us because we had used their own data and we made a report with the spreadsheet and we just showed them where this was perfectly coherent and we won. The compelling case is super important. I'll make this analogy. Educators are taught that little kids will learn a lesson or change their behavior or do something because they want to please their parents or they want to please their teacher. Adults don't give a rat's ass what other people think. They want to know what's in it for them. So you have got to create a compelling case for the vision that you have for what you want to see done that matters to other people. Therefore, you have to speak in terms that matter to others. And I encourage you to be multilingual about it. So the multilinguality that I recommend, if you can do it, and don't BS, just don't BS because everybody sees through it. But if you can speak in terms of cost cutting and pollution prevention, if not increased productivity or improved creature comfort, whatever, but if you can speak in multiple languages, more people are listening to what it is you're proposing. It's super, super important to have a buddy that you can bounce your arguments off of and get them to find the holes in it. Because you don't want to go to a public hearing and get sworn in and say something really stupid if you can help it. If you have a friend that you can trust who's in this with you, who can say, oh, I'm not so sure about that. And I've listed here that you should analyze what you're disputing for its design assumptions. What are they presuming? So, for example, on that garbage incinerator proposal, they were presuming that we were going to find enough communities surrounding Louisville to pay $50 a ton when we were currently paying 20 to bring all their garbage to Louisville, which is a hauling expense, and pay us to burn it. I mean, that just wasn't a reasonable assumption. It wasn't coherent. They hadn't completely thought all this out, and it was certainly inconsistent with the mantra of reduce, reuse, recycle. And then there were the consequences, the air pollution that would go with incineration. And people forget you can't burn everything, some stuff still has to go to the landfill. So the point being is, just think through your arguments and have a devil's advocate to find the holes in your argument and then fix those holes. When you do this, you get access to the media. If the media believes you've thought things out, they're going to come to you and ask your opinion. Or when you go to them, they're going to take the time to listen to your ideas. Number 4 is particularly philosophical. And I think that you have to see yourself as a powerful person. If you see yourself as a victim, it comes across. You just have to view yourself as that you do not need to apologize to other people for your concerns. On the other hand, it's super, super important to be courteous. It's not just important to do it because it's the right thing to do and because it reflects your personality and your values, but frankly, people are a whole lot more likely to help you if you are polite. Please and thank you go a long way in this business. It's also super important to separate people's intentions from their behavior. I'm a smart girl, but I can't know people's intentions. I may think I know other people's intentions, but I generally can't possibly assert that. All I can do is judge people by their behavior. And I don't know if their behavior is bad because they had a fight with the spouse at breakfast, or they didn't get a good night's sleep, or they're hungry. You just have to let that stuff roll off your back. If you're dealing with somebody who was a real jerk, forget about it. The next time you deal with them, pretend you don't remember that. Don't leave yourself wide open, but give people the chance to improve their behavior the next time you engage with them. And if you keep acting like this over time, they will see that you're not trying to be a jerk about anything, and they're just more likely to either help you or at least get out of your way. And the idea of dressing like, and I use the term opponent, not so much, I don't really usually mean the opponent is within the government. Usually the opponent is the applicant or the polluter or whatever you want to call it. But many years ago, I was advocating for some public policy changes, and I was running into brick walls with some women who were probably old enough to be my mom. And I complained to my boss that these women were not really listening to me, and they were blocking me getting my concerns to the people who could make the changes. And he told me he thought I should try dressing like them. Well, these women wore, these suits with the A skirts that are tight and heels and all that stuff. And I looked at him like he was nuts and said, I'm not going to wear clothes like that. And he said, go find a style that's dressier than what you're doing, but that you're comfortable in. And I did. And I started wearing these dressier outfits to these same meetings with these same women. And they said to me, well, you're looking very nice today. And I would say, Gordon told me, I told Gordon I was having some problems with some people reacting to me superficially, and they weren't really listening to my ideas. And so he told me to dress like them, and maybe they would listen to my ideas. And I'm finding it's working. They never seem to realize I was talking about them to their faces. And they just thought this was a smart idea. This was good advice my boss had given me, but they started to cooperate with me and help me just because I changed my clothes. I'm willing to do that to get the job done, you know? Okay, number 5. I've gone to a lot of seminars over the years on how to work with the media, and really the key essential thought, and the media is very powerful, I have to stress, and maybe I don't need to stress, but you've got a mouth and you've got email and stuff like that, but boy, the media can just propagate it through the community. And it's like a huge megaphone, and it's to your advantage to try to use the media to your advantage. It is like every other aspect of life, it's dependent on good relationships. We all get things done in any facet of our lives because we have a good relationship with somebody or not. And so the media needs to learn that you are reliable, that you don't talk out of your butt, that you've got factual information, and that you can speak succinctly without cussing, using rude gestures, or name calling. You can't flip somebody off in a public hearing because they can't use the footage. You can't use certain bad language. So, and I realize I've used a little bit bad here, but I'm not going on TV right now. But they just need to know you're factual. Now, one of the things that I was taught, Jim Bruggers, who wrote for the Courier for many years, he was the environmental beat writer. He and I'd be talking about something, and he'd say, "Can you back that up with data?" And one time I go, "Bruggers, I've worked with you how many years? I mean, I don't make stuff up. Do you know that?" And he told me there's an axiom in the journalism world that says, if your mother tells you she loves you, you ask for documentation. So the point is, if you're asked to prove it, don't take it personally. You want a reporter who is paying attention to the facts. And remember that reporter's asking the other side the same question. And you want a reporter who's asking the polluter to prove what they're saying. And again, the business of being succinct. One thing I try to do, particularly with television reporters, is speak in short sentences and pause so that they can edit and it doesn't come off as stilted when they actually use the footage. This takes time to develop, and none of us does it perfectly, but I'm trying to give you tips on how to do it best. I cannot emphasize this last sentence of number 5 enough. I thought you declare when you're off the record. That is not true. You ask for permission to go off the record. And unless and until you get permission from the reporter, everything you say is on the record. There is middle ground here where, for example, if you've developed a good relationship with the reporter and you've got a tip, but you don't want it to be attributed to you, you can ask if they're willing to hear the tip on background. There's other terminology and stuff like that, but on background means they get to use the information, they just can't attribute it to you. Or you can say on background without attribution. But there are ways to get the information to a reporter and that they can use, but they have to have that good working relationship, and they have to believe that you know what the hell you're talking about, or they're probably not going to spend their time running it down because, like everybody else, the news hole is smaller and there are fewer reporters. Number 6, I've already kind of covered, but emphasizing here, you've got to really watch the jargon, particularly if you're talking to the media. Another thing, while I'm thinking about it, is when a reporter asks you a question, do not respond with a question because it isn't going to get used. Give them a comment. Okay, so back to the community support part. You want to, I've already said this, speak in multiple ways to the values you think your audience has. One of the nice things about being in the environmental movement is it also often does involve cost savings, which to a lot of people is much more important than pollution prevention. But in this business, we oftentimes can get our cake and eat it too, which I enjoy. I think it's super important to recognize that people are busy and they're overwhelmed. And I try hard to manage what Al Gore calls the despair budget. I try not to tell people about problems without giving them concrete calls to action, things that they can realistically do to help, because I don't want people to get bummed out and throw their hands up. I want them to get active. And so it's, I think that is a good way to approach things, to give people a way that's realistic for them to help. If you ask people to write a letter, very few will do it. If you ask people to send email, many more will do it, for example. If you ask an individual or a group for help and they say, I just can't do it, decline graciously. Don't give them a hard way to go. You don't know why they're declining. You can't take it personally. You might need to work with them another time. So don't burn that bridge. And then the last part about how to, number 7, how to stay in this game and not burn out, is you got to take the long view. You cannot get wrapped around the axle. You got to maintain your sense of humor. You have to give yourself and others permission to be human. If you don't, you're going to get depressed, frustrated, angry, and quit. Look at climate change. It's only because we're getting our butts kicked with fires and droughts and hurricanes that are really causing expensive damage that people are finally going, okay, I guess we're going to have to deal with this. We haven't quite hit rock bottom. Man, we are teetering on the edge of hitting rock bottom some days, it seems. And yet that's just the way humans are. I think it's important to enjoy the camaraderie and to maintain that sense of humor, because otherwise you're just going to burn out. And I suppose at this point I'm ready for Q&A. How about you, Michelle?
Thank you so much, Sarah Lynn. I do have a few questions that have been submitted before we got our session started. So if you give me just a moment, I'll pull those up and we'll look at those.